Good morning, bonjour. Good to see you all. And Davos, minus 18.5, I'm told, this morning. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for being so punctual in this particularly important event, unlocking investments in global land restoration. First of all, I would like to really thank our partners from Intent for hosting us and giving us all the facilities to have a wonderful session with you. Why land matters and why investing on land makes sense. Land matters because land feeds us. 99% of our food, our calories are coming from land. Land matters because it provides us with the water we drink. You know, these are particularly important services, but we take them for granted. Land matters to us because it provides us with the fashion, with the clothes. It clothes us. Our clothes are cotton, by and large, which is also coming from the land. Land matters because it feeds the animals that we also use for many actions. So food, feed, fashion, fiber. Remember the 4 Fs. Fuel is also provided by land, partially, when it comes to biofuels. So it is absolutely critical that we consider this for what it is. Land matters because 50% of our GDP is provided by the land. Land matters because we all, the 8 billion people on Earth, live on land. We don't live in the air. We don't live in the sky. We live on land. And what happens to land matters first and foremost to us. Land matters because 3.2 billion people are affected by land degradation in the world. Land matters because when there is drought, most of the time there's a disaster. 1.2 billion people are affected by drought. Over the last 15 years, droughts have increased by at least 20%. So it is absolutely critical that we take care of this. But land matters first and foremost because we invest on land, because our business is thriving on land. If land is not healthy anymore, imagine the quality of the food, if we get food at all in some parts of the world. Imagine where you would be having your coffee or tea, probably not produced here in Switzerland. So the interconnectivity between land far away from where you live and the place where you actually live is absolutely critical. So investing on land, because we are a global community, because those who produce food, those who distribute food, and the food systems and the fashion all depend on land. But it's not about me talking about the land. I have a wonderful panel that I would like to invite to join me here, if my iPad agrees to open again. Absolutely key that we welcome and join me in welcoming. I do need a mic. I don't have an additional mic. Yazen Kodmani, who is partner 3Y Agtech and Deputy Director General or Deputy Managing Director Biofarm in the United Arab Emirates. Where is Yazen? Welcome. Tanja Havmann, who is the founder of Clarmondial, a company in Switzerland. Welcome. Ronald Hovsepian, I hope I am not mispronouncing the name, who is President and CEO Indigo in the United States of America. And Swapan Mehra, who is a young global leader in the World Economic Forum and Chief Executive Officer of Iora Ecological Solutions in India. So these are 4 important speakers, and I hope we will have time for interaction, and I will try to moderate the session in such a way that we do have some interaction with you guys. So let me just first say that I want to have an interactive session, And I know you are all brilliant, and you are all happy to talk about your companies and what you do, but more importantly, how investing on global land restoration would be actually important to us. And but I will give the floor to someone, and if someone else wants to intervene, please just raise your hand or give me some blink of your eyes, and I will see how I will have a conversation. Can I start with you, Tanja? Not a mistake. We should have a more gender balance here, but that was a challenge. So at Clarmondial, you are developing and implementing new financing solutions for regenerative agriculture and land restoration in emerging developing markets. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and how this is all coming together, and what are the challenges that you are facing in doing so.
Great. Well, lovely to be here, and thanks for having me. So Clarmondial is an investment advisory firm dedicated fully to financing the environment. And we work with different partners to mobilize capital towards sustainable natural resource management, including agriculture in emerging and developing markets. Over the past 3 years, we've been developing and growing a fund called the Food Securities Fund, which provides an innovative source of working capital financing into agriculture value chains. And we started working on that fund probably more like 7 or 8 years ago, because we recognize that as global value chains shift and as there's an increased recognition of the importance of land for all the Fs that you mentioned, that requires more money upfront, upstream in the agricultural production zones, and that in many emerging and developing markets that's extremely difficult to get because of the way that traditional financial markets work. So we thought, why don't we use the value chain, which is sourcing all these commodities, coffee, cocoa, soybeans, rubber, in these markets, and use that to share accountability within the value chain to mobilize institutional capital. And that's what we've been doing for working capital financing, and now we're working on a second fund, the Biosphere Integrity Fund, which will provide longer-term intentional financing to transform strategic sourcing landscapes and value chains. The challenges are many, as you can imagine, because we finance some landscapes in the least developed countries, and there you see issues like war, which is happening in one of our borrower countries, and obviously things like climate change itself. So we are seeing that because of climate change, it means that coffee traders need to have more people working in rural Uganda or rural Kenya, actually monitoring the situation so that they can take steps to hedge the coffee price, for example, or support the farmers early in the agricultural season so they get the quality and the quantities that they look for. So it really requires a lot of specialist expertise and understanding of how the value chains work in order to finance them. And then it also requires, we think, at least initially, to develop such financing structures, blended finance. So we've been lucky enough to work with the U.S. Development Finance Corporation, DFC, Sol Family Foundation, and the Good Energies Foundation to actually be able to test this product so that we can scale it. We think that there are ways through smart financial structuring to mitigate those risks. And we've demonstrated it's possible to do that, but things like political risk, obviously climate risk, and then also the risk of new regulations, which is both a positive and a negative. So we're really excited about the trends and happy to talk more about it.
I'll come back to you. Let me move to the United Arab Emirates. Yazen Al Kodmani, your company operates in the United Arab Emirates. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I can try and talk about United Arab Emirates.
No, I'll come back to India. But to United Arab Emirates first. You operate in a desert. Yet I understand you do organic farming, and you have 60 crops that you produce in the desert. Tell us a little bit more. I'm curious to know, how does it work? Yeah. Where do you get the water? Where do you get the ingredients? And how do you maintain the level of minerals? I'm buying time. Is your mic?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for having me. I think at Emirates Biofarm, we produce over 60 varieties of fruits and vegetables on 25 hectares of basically what you would call marginalized or desert land. This experience obviously is a bit different than what you would call regenerative, because we're not we're generating from scratch, if you will. It's desert sand, lack of any organic matter. So
it works. It works.
it's fine?
Yeah.
All right. So on the farm, our experience has been in places like the UAE and that has lack of fresh water, extreme temperatures, heat. Our resources are too valuable to be producing conventional farming. And we believe that organic, regenerative, these value-added products are the way in a lot of these regions to be able to produce financially viably and to try and build something that could become sustainable down the line. Because I wouldn't want to pretend that it is sustainable today, but in a world where every nation is looking at its food security, especially after COVID, the government of the UAE is very interested in its food security and in ensuring that as part of its national security agenda. We believe this is the most sustainable way of doing it. And we believe that the benefits will show up not today, but this is a long-term strategy.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to you. Especially there's an image in the world about deserts that these are wastelands and these are dead lands. There is nothing that can be produced, and yet millions of people live in the desert. So people are curious to know where the food is coming from. So maybe you will educate us. Ronald. Indigo provides innovative solutions to support both regenerative agriculture practices and farmers' access to carbon credit. And I'm told that 38% of the planet's land mass in agriculture is agricultural land in pastoral land. So can you tell us more about what you do? This is an initial warm-up. I'll come back for a second round, but tell us more.
Sure. Thank you very much for having us today and to the panelists. What Indigo does, it really focuses on really helping the regenerative farming journey and meeting the farmer where they are on that journey to regenerative practices. And what's important to understand is that soil in that regenerative, soil is the foundation of that regenerative practice. It's the foundation of using the air, storing the water, and creating the ecosystem that lives within that soil, that biodiversity that we all seek to create more of. And as we look inside of Indigo, we really pursued using natural microbes to help the plants, and we harvest natural microbes that have already proven they can fight other stresses. And then two, we really focus in on measuring carbon removal through those regenerative practices. Right now we have over 8 million acres under work with the farmers, and we're touching now over 20 million acres globally, from India to the US. And this is an important part of the overall journey to creating that pure foundation of regenerative practices and helping farmers do that on a regular journey. This is where the company is focused as we've taken on this challenge really around what can we do to help the farmers move forward at a faster rate in adopting these practices. The good news is we're actually doing it, and we're seeing premiums being paid to the farmer for carbon removal. It comes in two forms, one in a Scope 3 premium payment, and two, a carbon offset. And what we see there is it's really important is to give the farmer choice, because the farmer has to take blended financing approaches, put all these pieces together, because we have to solve the equation of the first 3 to 5 years of those practice changes. That's the mathematical or the economic equation that we must address on that journey. We know once they're there, we have the science now, we've proven that. We've measured the outcomes that we seek to have, and we've done that in great scientific detail and rigor, and that's exciting from our perspective. So now it's just putting the economic structure together with the business model, going through the value chain, and helping the industry scale this up faster. So it's exciting. We're very excited. We had the first hard-measured carbon removals done about 5 years ago with one of the largest CPGs for Scope 3. And in 2022, we announced the first offsets measured, gone through a registry, so at scale. So very exciting.
Thank you very much. Swapan, let me come back to you now, in real life. India, you have 150 projects, I'm told, doing some sort of nature-based solutions. But India is also this country where the green revolution has boomed and has provided a lot of opportunities, but at the same time has been criticized for being source of pollution, source of too much chemicals put on the land and so forth. So how do you go about nature-based solutions in activities in a country like India, where you still have a certain level of poverty despite the economic boom that we know in this country?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having us here. And my organization is a nature-focused organization which works through science and data partnerships to deploy the best evidence for nature restoration, financing partnerships with value chain partners, but also payment for ecosystem services. At the moment, predominantly carbon. We do a lot of carbon offset projects in the land sector in India. And then finally, working with the government closely on influencing policy related to land restoration. So we've been involved in helping the government of India establish its UNCCD and UNFCCC land-related targets. We did the modeling for that. And most recently helping them develop a new instrument called Green Credits, which is a non-carbon-based instrument focused in India to help smallholder farmers practice regenerative farming through tree-based systems in India. We are also, of late, established 2 vehicles. One is a data science vehicle, which is in partnership with Esri to leverage their AI platform for carbon and non-carbon monitoring of degradation and ecosystem services in land in India. And secondly, a financing vehicle called Nature Returns, which is India-focused and hoping to leverage. We've been able to have a couple of partnerships already, leverage value chain partners who are sourcing from India to invest in restoration. As you correctly mentioned, the challenge is very huge. India has about anywhere between, there are 2 different studies which get quoted very often, but anywhere between 97 to 128 million hectares of degraded land. About 50% of this is agricultural land, which is at various stages of degradation, mostly owing to wind, water, but also very heavy fertilizer use, as you mentioned, the side effect of the Green Revolution. Now, while this is majorly a challenge for India, given that we have 1/3 of the size of the US, but 7 times the population. It's a major challenge. It's a food security challenge. It's an income challenge. 60% of our population still depends directly on land. So our focus is to try and create this ecosystem and be able to finance this transition. At the moment, we have projects which cover about 12 million hectares across the length and breadth of the country in partnership with various governments and corporate partners, but a lot more to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, colleagues, you have heard from the 4 speakers clearly a lot of opportunities out there in terms of land restoration, but also major challenges. Now, investing in land restoration makes a lot of sense from the economic point of view. According to economic studies I have seen, every single dollar invested in land restoration can generate up to $30 in income in terms of income and ecosystem services. So the question that comes to mind is this real? Is this true that it is so profitable? If that is the case, why are we not doing it? Why are we investing more income, more of our resources in actually degrading land? We are harvesting more than nature can regenerate. We are extracting rather than managing. So why are we not investing in long-term production, which will be beneficial for the investor, which will be beneficial for the planet, and will be beneficial for the community? So while these are small projects, but when you add them up, they actually become very important. In the case of the United Arab Emirates, you said that it may not be that sustainable. I mean, I understand maybe it may not be that profitable as of yet. You correct me if I'm wrong. But the question that I have, maybe you can jump if you feel you are ready to jump now. What are the incentives or the opportunities that you see in investing in this area where not everybody is doing the same? At the moment, what we see is that agriculture is the #1 driver of land degradation in the world. What does it mean? It means that we are extracting resources. We are not managing our resources. We are extracting from the natural capital. We are not investing back so as to maintain the production. So these 4 examples are proving us that it is possible to do it. But what are your secrets? Tanja, do you want to start?
Okay.
Okay, and apologies, I don't know what's happening with the noise here. So I think it's important, I think this is a classical sort of example of how economics and finance are two different things. So I think if we look at the economic value of land restoration, it's very clear. You know, investing in land restoration in emerging developing markets has huge economic and socioeconomic benefits, as well as long-term benefits to the government. But sort of capturing that in financial markets is typically very difficult. And I have a hypothesis, I've not actually seen it, the data behind it, but is that most of the agricultural production and value chains is actually funded from within the value chain itself and not by financial institutions. And so looking at then how the financing within the actual value chains work in terms of like what are the payment terms between different stakeholders, from input providers to intermediaries to off-takers, and how can we make sure that capital can be accelerated quickly and on better terms to the parts of the value chain where that's required. And then also, you know, if we look at the transition, I think a big challenge is that the people that the traditional value chains have put the risk onto are farmers, who are the ones that are least able to actually bear that transition risk. So we need to find ways to actually share the risk of transition finance within financial structures. And I think it is possible, but it requires sort of tailoring approaches and actually understanding a little bit about how the value chain works and where, you know, we can maybe ask a company to, instead of paying on 130 days, maybe pay on 60 days, or make a prepayment, or make an off-take agreement, or make a co-investment, or pay for carbon offsets or scope 3 emission reductions. So all those kind of things. So I think that there are opportunities, and I think those are increasingly there, but they require a bit of work.
Thank you. Ronald?
Yeah, just to add to and build on what you're saying, I think you have to go to the farmer, right? Let's just sit with the farmer and the land for a minute. The value chain is disaggregated, and it's been designed to do one thing, drive optimization or yield. That's what a farmer gets paid on. So the whole system is built on that as an operator. Underneath it, in general, about half the land is not owned by the farmer. And that creates a tale of how the economics flow as well that you were highlighting, Dan, as part of the journey of what we have to get done to bring together the value chain. At that farm gate, they're making decisions that optimize that year's crop. And that's part of what we have to do in tying together the value chain with the financing. And we have to begin on that front end piece of it, in my opinion. Demand has control of the supply chain, and it's completely disaggregated, and it's commoditized at that very bottom end. And that's why, if you look, there was a study just recently done out of Europe that highlighted over the past 20 plus years, the actual operating income for the farmers has gone down. It's continuing to go down, right? So all that pressure and risk is landing on the farmer. And as we come into these tough economic cycles, we have to come up with a different methodology by which we support that economic structure. And I believe what we're thinking about as a company, I know what we're looking at is absolutely using blended financing to help the farmer bridge that journey. We see millions of farmers and millions of acres right now and hectares where people want to move forward. They're nervous that the measurements aren't correct at this point. There's not a standard measurement approach. I don't know what the landowner wants to take as part of that negotiation each year. These are right at the front end of what she was highlighting in that value chain that we have to solve as part of the journey. And I think the solutions are all there now. They're circling. We have better data. I know that we talked with insurance companies yesterday about the actual data that we can share with them on what we've seen for actual hard measurements that have been reviewed scientifically by peer reviews on the modeling. Those are the kind of things that are going to bring to life the insurance industry to support this, as well as other financial institutions.
I think this is a very, very important cue to build on how this has to be about farmers. I'll start with a small example. Just 2 weeks ago, our teams were carrying out extensive community consultations in central India. This is part of a very ambitious project to restore about 200,000 hectares of land, which forms a corridor between 2 tiger parks in the country to reduce application of chemical fertilizers which are running off into the forest, enhance income, and promote what in India we now call natural farming, farm-based, input-based farming. So some NGOs have been very successfully rolling out alternative crops there, millets, are historical crops, which are known to not require too many chemical inputs, not too much water, and can also work off slightly degraded land, very climate resilient. And what we experienced there, or what we found out, was that these farmers have started applying fertilizers to millets in a bid to try and see if it increases the yields by 10 to 20%. The risk, the appetite of these farmers and their ability to finance this transition to regenerative farming or to land restoration on their own is so exceptionally limited that even if there is a reduction in revenues of 10, 20%, it just doesn't make sense. It means that it's not going to allow them to even meet the minimum standards of livelihood, life support that they need. So that means that there is a need to intervene at many, many levels here, right? So first is that this sector anyways suffers from conventional challenges of low credit availability, tenural issues. In India today, there are different statistics, but 80 to 90% of all farms are managed by women. But only 15 to 20% are owned by women. So the manager of the farm is not the owner of the farm. Makes it very difficult to even design simple things such as carbon credit programs, because you don't have land ownership. Makes it difficult to deliver public subsidy schemes, etc. So how do you do that? How do you bring in place planning? We supported the government of India in doing a roadmap for its bond challenge target. So we did like a top-down, bottom-up exercise. So we did a plan for about 18 million hectares of restoration. But when we went to do pilots on ground, it was very interesting because, one, you can prescribe a lot of restoration measures based on geospatial information, based on a small sample of information, but measures on ground are so contextual, right? Like, does that farmer want to support a tree-based system or not? Is there a value chain for tree output in that region or not? Is there a buyer there or not? Can we shift a cotton system to a millet system if there is no support pricing for millet? So I think that bringing the farmer, their income security, and their preferences, along with the broader ecosystem of support for that transition, is so very critical to even allow us to start thinking of moving towards that direction. And then comes the challenge of financing all of that, which in my opinion is still secondary, because till the time we get the data, connect these disparate sets of data, get the right plans, and build farmer capacity, also engage them through behavior change, we don't even know what this financing gap is. I mean, hypothetically, we can conclude that there is a very major gap in land restoration financing, but if you go to the ground, it's very difficult to fit that model into what's required at a local level. I'll conclude shortly, but carbon financing as an example. Now, there is a lot of focus on agroforestry-based systems, where the capital is being put in through carbon investors and buyers. We are also doing many of these projects. But the challenge is that in many cases, the carbon upfront capital is not enough to offset the opportunity cost for farmers for the 5 years till the time they start actually benefiting from tree produce. Now, if you also bring in additional financing to offset annual incomes, then suddenly these carbon projects become unviable. So how do you solve that problem? You need very, very good value chains and really sound systems.
Since you're busy,
yes,
maybe I can.
Yes.
I think there was a lot of points brought up that I would love to speak on from our perspective. I think there are some assumptions in the market that are very challenging. I see a lot of the big players pushing for regenerative, but they are expecting the same prices. And I don't think this is going to work, in my personal opinion. There's obviously a value of extracting from the land and soil, and there is a cost of protecting that value. Second is you talked about demand. Demand is the key driver of agriculture. So let's say when I talk about organic agriculture, for example, a lot of the industry would say that productivity is not the same, cost is too high, this is not viable. Meanwhile, we all went from cow milk to almond milk, which is 3x the price with no problem. We don't eat the cheapest fish. We're not eating tilapia, which is more sustainable. We're having sea bass and farmed salmon. We're all having Australian beef and so on. Our food systems are built on demand for the majority of it. Of course, I'm not talking about main crops like wheat and rice, but in my personal opinion, and through the 6 years that when I first started, I'm looking at how to grow food sustainably, but what's demanded in the market. And if I chase the trends and the global menu that we have today, everybody's having the same breakfast across the world. It's avocado on toast and almond milk and so on. And then it could be acai, and then it could be... So farmers should chase that, or should every farmer in every region, in our case, for example, should I try to produce dairy milk sustainably, or should I push for camel milk, which could be a sustainable alternative that doesn't require so much energy and cost of water and feed? We have an example in the UAE, which I think is great. We are starting to grow oysters and exporting it at this point. So oysters seem to grow much faster in the UAE waters. They don't require any climate control or feed. And they grow in the open water, creating a reef. And now, compared to regular oysters taking 2 years, they are producing them in 8 months and exporting them to Asia and Europe. So this is a sustainable source of protein that is being produced somewhere that is considered arid and sustainably. So now I'm interested, as my friend mentioned, in millets, in quinoa, instead of rice and wheat flour. So we don't want to produce what's in demand sustainably. We want to be part of the conversation to change what the food on the menu, especially in the new UAE, is to match our environment. And I think, as such, there is no single sustainable menu. So whether in Europe or Asia or the UAE, each region has its own challenges and sustainable food that they can produce. And in terms of financing all of this, for us, we're going to the consumer. Today, for example, organic certified products are growing 15% year over year in retail shelves. So this has helped a lot of farmers, and I deal with a cooperative in India and in Africa where I import some of their organic produce that I can't produce, that's in high demand, like ginger and turmeric and so on. And it seems like getting these certifications is empowering them to get a better price, to go direct to the market and finance some of this transformative agriculture that they are doing. And I see regenerative labels coming on board now. So far it has been consumer-led financing. And I hope that changes, but with today's prices, especially globally, agriculture is heavily subsidized. Depending North America, Europe, there's quota, there's trade barriers, there's subsidies, different subsidies. And that's all priced in currently. Yeah. So competing with that existing system is a bit difficult. Sorry. Please.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, please. There's a glass of water there. It's quite hot then because the heating system is blowing on you. I'll come to the room. I'm a little bit chaotic, so please be prepared. I don't know if we have roving mics, but maybe. Yes, I'll come back to you. I want to involve the room, and I'll come back to you. And I want us to move also beyond agriculture, because we do have other practices on land than agriculture. I don't know if we have anybody dealing with fashion here in this room. The fashion industry is booming, and it is probably one of the major sources of land degradation in the world. I was in Central Asia recently, and I saw the Aral Sea, and I saw what cotton production did to the Aral Sea. Millions of hectares are being lost by Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and so forth, due to our own activities and diversion of water for other practices. I also would like, if anybody in the room is interested in ecotourism, investing on ecotourism is absolutely critical. These large conservancies from around the world, it's land. And if you restore them, if you invest on them, it's good business. And unlocking opportunities and investments in global land goes beyond agriculture. I don't know if we have a few people here who are interested in sustainable water management. So, most people think that water is coming from the tap or from the bottle. It's actually coming from ecosystems, and these ecosystems have to be managed. So if there are people that are investing on ecosystems so as to maintain the quality of water and to be able to provide clean water to communities, please take the floor. Do we have some mics here? Or do we take any mic from the speakers? Please raise your hand if you want. I'm a little bit chaotic, so please raise your hand if you want to intervene. Meanwhile, if you need more water, let me know. Yes, please. Yeah.
Does that work? Yes. My name is Xenia. I work with the Sustainable Markets Initiative, and I co-chair the Hospitality and Tourism Task Force as well. And you mentioned ecotourism in there. We're working on a project this year which is going to include various stakeholders around nature investment to restore mangrove, which is a tourism asset. Any tourism asset is a natural asset usually. And we've got a pathway that we call Pathway to Nature Positive within tourism, and doing exactly that, where we realize where tourism has the management over a natural asset, we can get the investment into it for the tourism to look after it, to then make it a product that is paid for, and therefore you have the conservation. So it becomes a closed loop. And I think the link with agriculture comes in there as well. Again, tourism has an interest, and the hospitality, in taking a lot of the agricultural products off regenerative land. So there's a lot of cross-sector projects that we're working on in order to make that happen.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, I see a hand up there.
Hi, good morning. Hope we're all warm. Panel looks like they are. My name is Eric Binslev. I work with, wear a couple of hats, but the most important one is the Savory Foundation, and we work to perpetuate Savory Institute and Alan Savory's holistic land management of how to regenerate the soil through proper livestock management. Having worked for the past sort of couple of years to try and capitalize large-scale transformation of grasslands, and that be conservation or productive land. One thing that's very, very clear is that we can tweak and we can turn and we can attract and we can deflect, but we don't get around a couple of things. One, the fact that we not yet have established a natural asset class to treat nature, to treat our natural world as a critical infrastructure. If that happened, the whole investment game would change. And I struggle to understand why it's not being unlocked at this point. And the second one is that in the food and fiber industry, we are up against an incumbent system that is very entrenched and heavily subsidized. And we can tweak around the corner. I'm sure the panel sort of will nod to this. But we can't get around the fact that if we're going to make real large-scale global change on this agenda, we'll have to move the values in the value chain. And that means moving the money where the risk is absorbed, and that's on the land. And at the moment, it's downstream, especially with the input providers. And I really welcome Yara's initiative yesterday to really have the courage to go into essentially what is a complete change of business model, because we need those input providers as well to realize the facts, and we need them to come along, like the oil industry, to change the whole system. So I don't know if any of the panelists have got comments on their work in this field and the struggle to really change the game.
Thank you. Third hand, anywhere? I said 3 voices. This is your chance. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. My name is Derek Gallo, based in Brazil. I wanted to share just a little bit about one of my clients. It's called Thiaw Foods out of the UK, but working with the Mayan nut, the Brocimium alicastrum. And this tree actually regenerates soil. It biomineralizes carbon into the soil. It's permanent removals, and it's also a food. And the nut is an amazing flower. So it's an opportunity, for example, for big food companies to have an ingredient that can substitute corn or wheat, and also supports indigenous communities, can be used for regenerating land, sequesters carbon. The leaves are also an amazing fodder. with more than 20% protein. So just kind of curious in terms of how, when you're looking at, you're designing your systems and you're looking to optimize specific plants, specific trees that really can create all the benefits in terms of superfoods, in terms of nutrition, in terms of helping soil, carbon, et cetera. So just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me come back to the panel right now. You heard from the room, and probably you have your own views on this. There are multiple opportunities to invest on land and to do it sustainably. Pastoralism was mentioned, grasslands. We did not have time to go through the bit. It's a whole sector that is growing, not necessarily considered as priority in terms of investment, because we are still on agriculture, not necessarily on a larger scale pastoralism. But I wanted you to comment on one thing. Opportunities are there, investment are being made, but value chains are still quite limited in terms of new products. And the elephant in the room is subsidies. Subsidies are basically smashing a lot of small companies and making them very hard to actually appear, simply because there are huge amounts of money that are being thrown largely in in large agri companies, not necessarily in small companies, to help them thrive. So it is a discussion that has always been there, and it is very difficult to have a proper discussion. I understand WTO is going to discuss this in the next few weeks or months. The whole question is not to say stop subsidies, but repurpose them. Repurpose subsidies so as to create opportunities for those people who are thriving, trying to just emerge, and those businesses that are trying to emerge, and there are multiple in the world, and there are 600 million small farmers in the world, families or farmers that would need these kinds of subsidies. One, to increase the production, but more importantly, to reduce the food loss and the food wastes. I don't know if people realize how much food is being wasted post-harvest, or being lost, sorry, post-harvest, simply because people have no access to market or cannot conserve their food. There is no cooling system for them. So they have no access to energy. So if you repurpose that harmful subsidy into a positive investment in promoting renewable energy, then you will be saving 40% of the food that these poor farmers hardly, under very difficult conditions, that they produce. So I want you to comment on subsidies and how this is impacting and small businesses like yours, on how value chains can be actually promoted in a way or another.
If you don't mind me jumping, because I have a specific example. We throw away about 20% of the production. So if I produce 3 to 4 tons a day, about 600 kilos. So I set up a small black soldier fly setup to experiment. We have about 15,000 chickens. I took 100 and I started producing some of the feed on the farm through our waste. And a country like UAE imports 80 to 90% of the food. We throw away. So with food waste is a big number, and food loss, together it's up to 38%. So using this resource, and we import all of our feed for all of our animal production. So using this waste to produce a feed, a sustainable feed, is supposed to be an excellent opportunity. And when I dug into the situation, the feed that's coming from the US is subsidized 20 to 40% before it reaches us. And then the UAE government subsidizes for the local farmers. There is no way on earth that, no matter what scale, that I can compete with that. Even people invested in local farms in Africa, and the cost of getting it from the US is still higher from your own farm. Yes. So we are benefiting from these subsidies, but it's environmentally damaging for them. And for us, it's not encouraging alternatives. The black soldier fly, hopefully, would be a viable alternative in the future. It's up to 50% protein, and it lives on waste, on food waste. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. I can take you glasses if you need. Thanks. Do you need another glass of water?
I mean, I think there are a lot of points we can talk for a long, long time about. But I wanted to just wanted to mention sort of two things, and also just on the side, in terms of policy, I think there's always unintended consequences to policies, be they EUDR or CSRD or the Inflation Reduction Act, Iora, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Act. We can go on and on and on, but I think that's not what is so interesting for this discussion if we actually want to talk about what we have to do and what the opportunity is right now. I think when we look at agricultural value chains and financing land restoration, I think it's important to look at both longer-term investments that are very intentional and strategic, which it sounds like you're doing, which is absolutely fantastic, and we need to scale that up massively, massively, massively. We need to look at new technologies, be it venture capital, growth capital to strategic businesses. But I think the other thing that we really need to look at as well is just the blood that flows into these value chains, which is working capital financing. And that's also why we started looking at the value chain without appropriate and timely working capital and influencing that flow. We are just not going to get to where we need to be. So I think it's an important part of the equation. And I think we are actually in an extremely important and timely point in time right now, because given the global macroeconomic situation and the increases in interest rate that we've seen over the last sort of year and a half, what's been since COVID, I think now we're seeing that the opportunity cost of financing those agriculture value chains in a business as usual way has changed, and that larger companies and institutions that were no longer so interested in shifting to regenerative agriculture are interested in thinking about how they can shift, because it might help them access capital that is slightly cheaper or on slightly better terms than what they would have had access to, than what they have access to, even larger groups. So we're seeing even in the Netherlands, we're designing a new financing structure there with some large partners and a bank, and even there, like on a fully secured basis, farmers are borrowing at close to, between 5 to 10%, which is unheard of in the recent past. So I think this is really an opportunity, because I think we can get institutional capital into some of these value chains, especially if it is slightly more liquid, so like slightly shorter term, and also if we can de-risk that, which we think that we can do. So I think it's important to look at those things, but I also think it's really important to sort of try to segment those capital flows and see, where we can put pressure, and also the current timing, I think, is fantastic to do more.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to build on this set of discussions, I think I'd make everybody step back and look at this situation. We're building a new system within a current system that operates. So we have to look at where the money flows inside of there. So if you actually stare at the system, a lot of the financing of the system comes in several ways. One, it comes down through a number of the traders. Actually, they're the ones who are financing a number of the spreads that live between the farmer and the ultimate buyer, right? They own processing facilities that sit between those farmers and the ultimate buyers. And they play a critical role as part of that journey. A lot of that capital sits on their balance sheets, actually. And what we're trying to do is create more of an open system, as you was just saying, that would allow us to bring that to life. Second part of that system being more open is the ability to make flexibility for the farmer. We talk about vignettes, and we all have them, of where we're doing some things really well. The pattern that I've seen that we've got to address, we must address, is flexibility. The farmer needs choice on financing and which crops they produce each year. If we go back to the request on fiber, we've done work, we just signed an arrangement with the Fashion Pact, over 20 players in the retail sector using cotton, so to take on the regenerative practices associated with that. That's great. But what matters is that same farm is going to be producing another crop in an off-season. So the flexibility needs to sit at the farm gate in their choice of financial monetization. And then the second part of it is up in the value chain, we have to make sure that that money flows through the different channels that could exist in these new channels that will emerge. The measurement tools that we've all talked about that are required in here also need to be flexible. And the way we've approached it from that perspective is we didn't pick a particular practice or a particular tree. What we did was we said there are categories. And the way we designed the model is that you can come back with a new category. We're just finishing 2 years of study on igneous rock. and the impact that it has from the glacial attributes of sequestering more carbon in the ground. Great. It's really exciting. We have papers you can read. But what's more important is that'll be a category that will be, it fits under an existing category within the methodology that we're bringing to that farm gate. So flexibility is the word of the day as we think about the financial part of it and the operating part. Those are the two pieces we need to bring together, because these discussions are fantastic, but we've got to make it happen at the farm gate, because that decision that we've all talked about happens annually or within a season when you go down to the southern hemisphere. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think a lot to reflect on here, but a few thoughts. I think from an India perspective, I think there is a massive opportunity right now to engage in financing the world's second largest production system of agriculture, which has traditionally never used or never attracted any structured finance outside the public sector, right? Almost all of our credit in agriculture is either public from the government or informal, even now. There has been apprehensiveness on behalf of the government to, and there are many legitimate drivers to allow for corporate offtake, long-term contracts, tenurial transfer in the agriculture sector in India to protect smallholder interests, to protect national food security. But what we are seeing now is that this idea of valuing and monetizing the intangibles, ecosystem services, be it to begin with carbon, which is a major driver, but now there's talk of water, now there's talk of biodiversity, there's talk of the cultural values, ecotourism. In the green credit scheme of India, we've just done tree planting, and the next that we're doing is water, enhancing groundwater. So I think that this idea of monetizing the intangibles has resonated very well with the public sector, with the governments, and around that, they're actually very openly supporting bringing together corporate finance, corporate investors with a large group of farmers. So I think there is a significant opportunity to use that as a platform. And when I say platform, I think a lot more can be done. I'll give a small example. We are working with 100,000 farmers in Meghalaya, northeast of India, biodiversity hotspot. Used to have a lot of shifting cultivation, slash and burn. And we are working on restoring this land through a combination of tree and other food crops. Now, because this has been structured into a sort of a single cooperative slash producer organization in partnership with the government, it has started attracting a lot of interest from so many value chain partners, from people who want to invest in honey, people who want to invest a little bit in biodiesel trees, people who want to invest in processing for turmeric, for ginger. So I think that these platforms that we are creating on the payment for ecosystem service basis can unlock a lot of finance. I'll very quickly talk about policy. You know, India is a very big example of a policy challenge, because we have the world's largest fertilizer policy. It's an input policy. And it has resulted in a lot of challenges. In some parts of India, I was reading our report that we did for the government on degradation before this meeting. And in one of the states in India, the NPK ratio, which is scientifically advised for paddy, is I think 8:2:1. And the application actually is 24:2:1. Because it's just so much driven by intermediaries and subsidy. But we have to also understand that it was this subsidy that allowed a country which was extremely food deficient to become food surplus. Today we export 20 million tons of rice to the whole world. So it has a legacy, it has served a very major purpose. It still serves a purpose. I mean, it's not like it's completely failing our cropping system. Farmers are still using it to produce record wheat and rice gains. It is affecting the soil. Farmers recognize that in our conversations. They're just waiting for the right alternative to allow them to transition. And I feel that if we can effect that transition through, my last point, really good use of knowledge and science, which blends traditional wisdom with modern science, I think the policy transition might happen on its own. Because if there are no takers for the subsidy, what will the subsidy do? So things such as the right tree systems, what are the right tree systems? That knowledge is lost. Can we recreate that? Can we then create supply chains not only of the output but the input? We feel there is a huge input challenge. Do you get the right seeds or not? So I think a lot of issues to work on, but I think that the policy challenge, in my opinion, is very closely linked to the knowledge and the value chain challenge.
Linked to the policy challenge is, this is the last point I want to have a final round. Am I allowed to do a final round? Do I have time? Okay. I want to have a final round discussing the issue of tenure, land tenure, because it is the second elephant in the room. Today, we all know that the level of degradation is so high that we will need to restore 1.5 billion hectares of land by 2030 if we are to have a balanced planet. Not everything is totally lost. We still have some land that can still produce, but the level of production has gone down, so we will have to restore it to a healthier state. On the other hand, our economists are telling us that it is worthwhile investing on land restoration. So I think one of the bottlenecks we see is actually land tenure. Not only for women, someone mentioned women and the low level of access of women to land, which is ridiculous. I will come back to that. But also in terms of incentives for investors to invest on land restoration. Whose land am I going to invest in? And what security do I have in investing? Because it's a long-term investment. It's not something that will be, I'll be collecting. It's not like planting maize. It's probably 30 years, 40 years before you actually start, winding down. What guarantees are there? What opportunities are provided for investors to invest on land, be it public or private land? So it can be, of course, private land with negotiations with the landowners. The biggest issue we face in the world today is women's access to land. It is, according to statistics that we have, only 1/4 of women own land in the world. In some regions, including Middle East and North Africa, only 4% of women own land. So it is absolutely fascinating. On the other hand, you know that they actually produce. You know that they actually invest a lot of their efforts on somebody else's land. And you know that they actually are the first ones to transform all the products. The commercialization is actually done largely by women once the production is completed. So there is something that is not gelling in terms of our sustainable development goals. How can we achieve sustainable development goals if 75% of our producers do not own the land that they produce in? How can they maintain, will they invest in that land? It is one of the causes of land degradation because you exploit land which you don't own. Therefore, you have no incentive to invest in the long term. You don't have access to technical advice. You don't have access to banking systems because you cannot use them as collateral. So there is something that we also would like to discuss in terms of land tenure in the world, both for investments, but also for small farmers. So maybe the last round of discussion on this. Are you facing, I think it was Swapan who was mentioning the difficulty with women having access to land in India, but probably similar examples from around the world. Yes, please.
I can start. I think this is clearly a challenge and not a very easy challenge to solve. In addition to the challenge of women not owning land, there is also a huge issue in general because a lot of, we call them absentee landlords. There is a lot of Indians. So interestingly, India's internal migration from rural to urban settings, I was reading a report, is the largest human migration in history in terms of numbers because it's hundreds of millions of people. So it's led to a lot of vacant agriculture land. And now these are all being managed by workers who don't have title. So the decision maker on the land does not have tenure or title on the land, and how does that help them then access schemes? How do you design new programs? One initiative that India is doing, which is interesting, is creating an agri-stack. So just like we have the India stack, which has our financial payment systems and IDs for every unique ID for every individual, we are now creating an agri-stack in which the government is supporting the digitization of each agriculture fields boundary, which is a very, very ambitious step in India, given that almost, I think 80% of our land ownership is 5 hectares and below, smallholder farmers. And then also documenting the landowner, but also trying to create a system in which we can document the land user in a formal agreement with the landowner. So that's a major effort. We try and do that at a project level, but it's, I think, impossible for any private organization to tackle this at scale. Anecdotally, we are doing a restoration project also in Colombia, which is also 100,000 hectares. And we laugh in our teams because for the 100,000 hectare project in Meghalaya in India, we are dealing with 120,000 farmers. In Colombia, we're dealing with 10. So this is a very interesting challenge. But there is effort in that direction from the government. And I think, again, I'll keep coming back to the fact that there is so much need for capacity building and knowledge, and to make women aware that if they have to really keep tilling this land, they need to also clarify this role within families, right? Because it's owned by somebody in the family who's just missing. So that's an issue of awareness. It's an issue of arguing for rights, which is a very ongoing large challenge.
Thank you very much. Just a comment on India. One example which I thought was very smart is that the government of India is investing billions of dollars into land restoration through a social security fund, Mahatma Gandhi Security Fund. So instead of distributing cash to the poor, they are actually restoring their own land so that they can produce. So creating a more sustainable approach and lifting them out of poverty simply by investing on building the land, the health of the land back to be able to produce again. So I think there are incentives and subsidies. In this point, it is a positive subsidy that can be promoted. I thought Tanya's hand, yes. Yeah,
I wanted to, because I sometimes have a bit of an issue with this discussion around the importance of tenure, and I can give many examples where just giving farmers, their right to the land has not led to additional financing, including in places in West Africa. But so I really appreciate what you were saying, because I think to me, like access to land, land has value because of the revenue flows that come off it, and because you have ownership of the land and you can transfer that ownership in case you need to do that and have a lump sum payment. So if you're looking at access to credits, the challenge is that we don't have very good rural finance infrastructure. So even that a farmer has that land right in an emerging market may not still mean that they have access to credit, because the bank will just simply say, the likelihood of me being able to take over this land and make something of it and sell it so that I can recover my loan is still very difficult. So I think it's important, the things that you're mentioning in terms of being able to separate out like revenue flows from land and building those out in community structures, for example, I think it's a separate discussion than actually like ownership over the land, and I think that's it sounds like incredibly important work that you're doing. But I think it's a really important nuance that we sometimes forget.
Absolutely. There's no clear relationship between land ownership and access to credit, because actually it's in most countries, including in many countries of West Africa that I know best, you don't have a banking system that is actually adapted to these kinds of investments. The banking system is actually looking at cities and how to invest in activities that they are more familiar with. There are very few banking systems in most countries that are actually adapted to rural investments, and because they feel like it's too risky for them. So it is actually a reform of the banking system that will be concurrent to, that will be necessary in order to invest on land restoration. I'm a farmer. My family is a farmer. I'm coming from a very small village, and I know how hard it is for them to have access to credit because they're not credible. Simply put, they are not as credible as a civil servant who lives in a city. Ronald.
Yeah, I've talked to. Listen, we have fairness, diversity issues, not biodiversity, but fairness, diversity issues everywhere in the world, right? Whether it's a westernized cultures or whether it's the emerging markets. And when you look at it, and I've had a chance to speak to a number of people on these topics from the U.S. to around the globe, and what you'll see is a common theme, and what you're highlighting is there's a hard asset, the land. That hard asset of the land is going through generational changes, migratory pattern changes, and these are causing that moment of change to happen. When those moments of change happen, those groups that are have less access to the capital becomes the core issue. So we do have the ability to impact that if we can tie it back to the physical land through lending instruments. And I think the governments in general are very happy to do that. My biggest learning came from a black farmer in the U.S. who leads one of the black farmer unions in the U.S. And what he shared with me was he has access to the deals when they're happening. So this is, I'll use the U.S. language. This is Grandma Smith who's going to sell, and Grandpa passed away. All the cars are out front at their home, and the other farmers stop by to pay their respects to the family, and then they go by and speak with her about what does she want to do at the farm. And he would go by and have those same exact conversations, and they would be very open to selling him the farm. Very open. Then the difference is, as he explained to me, is the quick access to capital. And the fact that the other farmers that are buying and doing more of the consolidation of the land ownership, they can get that capital faster. It's a speed question and an access question to the volume of it. And I think that's the area where we need to really focus on bringing that to the front and center of the lending environment. By the way, we called a banker to help him out. He's the first black owner of a processing facility in the United States.
Okay.
Are you kidding me? Like the first? Like really? We're that slow? Right? I mean, it's awful, right? But that's the truth, right? And it's just a slow-moving industry, agriculture. It doesn't turn over fast. When you talk to a farmer, most of them speak to you about their life in a 40-year season cycle. That's how they look at the world, because they're living in that annual cycle as they go through that journey. So we have to help all the groups that have been less served in the journey of the world, and make sure we bring them to the front and center of that. And I believe the hard asset of the land is actually the best tool to do that. And I think that actually, of all the things that the governments can do in the banking system, is take advantage of giving them access to operational loans and acquisition loans. That would be where I would want to see the focus.
Thank you. Yazen, do you want to say something, or before I start wrapping up? I still have one last round going to you, but you only have 10 seconds to respond to my question. So please be prepared. Yes.
I don't want to go against the general consensus, but in my experience, if you fill this room with farmers, I don't know how many will be asking for credit. They will be asking for fair prices. Right now, the situation favors the most abusive, so you're getting in the chocolate industry and so many industries, you're getting children, and mainly farmers are aging. They are leaving their farms, they're going to the cities, the families going to the cities, they're leaving it to the poorest who would want to work on there. A lot of times they do it just to keep ownership of the farm, so they want to cover the costs and have some subsistence and so on. I don't know if credit is gonna solve this. I know it's an important tool, but how are they gonna pay back? And ultimately, how can we get farmers better paid? This is, I think, the most important thing to solve. So many, they will invest in their land. They will put in the effort to make it sustainable and so on. So yeah, I think that's
small farmers, you mean?
Yeah, I'm talking about smallholder farmers. I think large farm operations have access to capital and need it, and of course, I'm talking about smallholders. Yes.
Okay. I have 2 minutes left, so this round will last 2 minutes. Please respond to his question, starting with you, Swapan. Is there anything that you had wanted us to discuss today which we missed to convey? And basically, what message do you want to pass to the room?
Great question. I was just thinking of a message that I wanted to pass and I didn't, which is that I think we all need to share the responsibility of our farmers towards this transition towards sustainable land management. I mean, these smallholder farmers, they struggle with credit, with produce, weather risk, water risk, climate risk, and now we want them to do low carbon farming, climate resilient farming. What are we doing? We all need to change our consumption. We all need to start consuming regenerative crops. We all need to be willing to pay a higher premium for these. Till the time we don't work on behavior change of consumers, the work on behavior change of farmers is not complete.
Very good. So the burden is not only on the producer, but also on the consumer. Message clear.
Building on that, I would say the number one thing that we should discuss is making sure that the sustainability premium that is coming into the market remains isolated from the commodity. As you were saying, if you want a fair price and you want to do the work, we have to have the sustainability premium isolated. That flow of capital will allow the farmer to know that if the commodity price goes up or down, it doesn't matter. I'm still getting paid to do that sustainable work. That is going to be the most critical thing in redefining or evolving this system as we know it.
Thank you. Tanja, elevator speech.
Yeah, I think we need to stop trying to develop new financing. So I'm just to kind of build on your point, or I'm not advocating building a financing system that puts financial burden on farmers. I think we should look at how we apportion accountability within the value chain, including with financiers. So I think that the whole value chain should take responsibility and help to de-risk capital and operating sort of support to help transition those value chains. I don't think it should be on the kind of burden of the farmers, but obviously the farmers should be the ones driving and be involved in those discussions.
Thank you. Yazen?
I think back to regenerative agriculture, there's a lot of developments in terms of technology that can be used. I'm talking about soil-based regenerative agriculture. The data centers the sensors that are coming out are excellent, and robotics. So we have a huge issue with weeding and weed control, and traditional chemical weeding is being phased out, and in organic, you're either going to have to till or solarize the land or cover it, and that damages the soil base. So now I'm seeing robots that are, this is very exciting. So in terms of investments in global land restoration, so these robots that are doing direct weeding, the data center, the sensors, this high-end technology is gonna support these nature-based climate solutions, I believe. And I just wanted to add that.
Very good. Use of new technologies and for example, managing the water, how much water do you need for the plants, for the soil, et cetera, et cetera. I think there are a lot of new opportunities to come. Please, a round of applause to Yazen, to Tanja, to Donald, and to Swapan. And please, another round of applause to Intent. Andre, thank you so much for your support. Well, I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Certainly, we have a lot of opportunities this year, including at the UNCCD Conference of the Parties in Saudi Arabia, December 2024. We will have the 16th session of the COP of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. Issues of land will be top on the agenda, issues of drought, how to access to water, and how all of that is linked to migration. Someone mentioned migration not only from rural to cities, but in international migration and unwanted migration. How is land issues, drought, water scarcity, how all of this is fueling actually conflicts from around the world and the security that is coming with it. So, we enter through the biophysics and we finish with social issues and economic and health issues and so forth. So if you want to have discussions about all of these, please come to the Conference of the Parties in Saudi Arabia. We have a great host and we have wonderful opportunities. So please engage. We will have non-state actors, business industry, local authorities, youth, women's group. So we will have a lot of opportunities to prepare and to contribute to the success of the Conference of the Parties. And if you want to see policy change, as boring as they are, go to COPs, because that's where it happens. So it is COP16 of the CBD in Colombia, COP29 of the climate change in Azerbaijan, and COP16 of the UNCCD in Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much.